Long ago, the world was nothing more than an endless sea, cloaked in a boundless sky, reaching as far as could possibly be imagined. Then two great titans came into existence, the Bionis and the Mechonis. The titans were locked in a timeless battle, until at last, only their lifeless corpses remained.
Founded in 1999 by Tetsuya Takahashi and Masaya Nakamura, the company Monolith Soft had big ideas for games, turning out instant classics like Baten Kaitos Eternal Wings on the Nintendo GameCube, and the spiritual successor to Xenogears, Xenosaga, on the Sony PlayStation 2. These, however, would merely pave the way for one of their most recent and arguably largest successful franchises, Xenoblade Chronicles. Today, for my IAT 210 term project, I will be analyzing Xenoblade Chronicles and discussing how it is an exemplary model of its genre, its design qualities, and what led to its success. Originally launched in 2010 in Japan only, Xenoblade Chronicles met with critical acclaim from the Japanese audience. Because of this, and a lack of plans to release the game overseas, fans all over founded the campaign Operation Rainfall, which sought to, and ultimately succeeded in, localizing 3 titles: The Last Story, Pandora's Tower, and of course, Xenoblade Chronicles for an overseas release. Upon receiving perfect or almost perfect scores across the board in Japan and overseas, Xenoblade Chronicles quickly became regarded as one of the best JRPGs ever by many. Due to this popularity, a spiritual successor, Xenoblade Chronicles X on the Wii U, and recently a sequel, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, on the Nintendo Switch have also released. However, the game on the Nintendo Wii will be the sole focus for this analysis. Xenoblade Chronicles is categorized as a role-playing game, specifically an open-world Japanese role-playing game, or JRPG for short, and has the Mimicry game mode. The main distinction between a JRPG and a Western RPG in terms of gameplay is that JRPGs are generally turn-based combat, whereas Western RPGs are generally real-time combat. The genre of RPG attracts certain gamers more than others, most notably from the gamer motivational model are immersion story, achievement completion, and mastery strategy for this particular game. How these gamer models will tie in with the mechanics and the narrative of the game will be highlighted as the analysis continues. Strong narratives are paramount for RPGs, and Xenoblade Chronicles is no exception. The story of Xenoblade Chronicles follows the main character Shulk, whose peaceful hometown is quickly left in ruin from a Mechon assault. From this assault, many casualties are sustained, and thus Shulk initially sets out on a quest for revenge, wielding the powerful, yet mysterious sword called the Minato. This follows a linear and embedded narrative structure. However, the game and its characters evolve beyond what they initially appear as the story progresses, and through optional interactions between party members. Shulk's journey also mimics the stages found within the monomyth, aka the hero's journey, since the Minato is a gift from the gods calling him to adventure while facing many trials along the way. There's even a point where Shulk is literally in the belly of the whale. At first, Shulk's main conflict is with the seemingly evil Mechon race, and specifically Metalface, who orchestrated the destruction of his hometown. However, as the wielder of the Minato, he is also granted visions of the future, which often lead to an internal conflict, as Shulk frequently second-guesses what they mean and what he has to do to prevent these visions of death. During the assault in Colony 9 is where Shulk first receives this power, as he sees a vision of impending death by a Mechon, reacting instinctually to save himself, if only just barely in time.
Wow, Shulk's pretty awesome!
As with any RPG, the mechanics of Xenoblade Chronicles are quite elaborate and weave together to create something unique. The hundreds of game objects in the world of Xenoblade Chronicles each have their own static and dynamic attributes, ranging from the static types of collectibles like the vegetable energy aubergine, to the dynamic state of the Minato and everything in between. As an illustration, the Minato has 3 unlockable forms, and has a vision state attribute of on or off, depending on the circumstances in which Shulk finds himself. Therefore, Shulk's visions are not limited to cutscenes, when often in battle, Shulk will have vision of enemies that are about to perform a devastating attack. The player can then warn a party member about the attack, and have time to think about what art to use. For example, if Shulk is in the party, but not being directly controlled when this happens, the player can use the operative actions of warn party member, and use art Minato Shield, to perform a resulting action of mitigating damage dealt by the attack to keep party members alive and ultimately altering fate, providing there is at least one segment of the party gauge filled in the top left corner. This allows the game to combine the strategic elements of turn-based combat with the excitement of real-time combat. The rules, operative actions, and subsequent resultant actions of the game are many. There are a maximum of 8 different arts the player can select from, and attack enemy with selected art is an operative action that is detailed in the written rules of the tutorials and performed with the operational rules of using the directional pad and the A button to scroll through and select each art. However, if the selected art is something like backslash on Shulk, then the player can combine the operative action, in conjunction with the 3D continuous space within the game, to deal extra damage to an enemy, thereby performing a resultant action. As mentioned, characters have 8 unique arts at a time that allow for certain attacks, however the game uses no mana. Instead, each art is on an independent cooldown and is one of 8 different types, like Buff, Physical, Ether, Daze Inflicting, Break Inflicting, Topple Inflicting, Talent, and Aura. This allows for strategic use of arts while warning party members, and more importantly during chain attacks, which pause combat to give players time to select an art from each party member in succession. Because there are real-time and some turn-based elements as opposed to strictly turn-based, it requires a lot of strategy on the fly, lending itself to a more engaging battle system than traditional JRPGs, which in turn makes Xenoblade Chronicles stand out through this unique combination. Chance is, in a sense, tied to the foundational rules not just in Xenoblade Chronicles, but in most games in general. Because the foundational rules are a mathematical representation of the game state, it only then follows that chance as a mechanic will directly alter or influence calculations like damage or health. For instance, do you have enough agility to have a high % chance of dodging that fatal attack? Will Sharla heal the correct ally, or will she use her talent art Cool Off instead?
Like we don't gotta cool off. Just when I gotta cool off.
Chance in RPGs is crucial, as it essentially guarantees that no 2 playthroughs will be exactly the same, since many side quests may be easier or harder within the game, depending on your luck. With many of the nearly 500 side quests requiring you to explore large parts of the world, it gives the player a sense of pride and accomplishment when completing side quests and discovering locations such as landmarks and secret areas. While exploring, what's amazing is if it's visible, chances are the players can actually get there. Additionally, there are many in-game achievements that can challenge even the most seasoned of players. These mechanics all tie in together to help create an easily sustained flow state for the player, where the challenges of the game and the skills required of the player are in equilibrium and allow the player to take on the game's challenges at their own pace. Providing you don't try and immediately challenge immovable Gonzalez.
Are we insane? Impossible.
Yeah!
Sword drive. We're not gonna make it.
While certain level enemies spawn primarily in certain areas, there are some unique and even super bosses that appear to give the player more varied challenges. Unique enemies are generally significantly stronger than regular enemies that often have secondary effects, like an effect which returns a portion of the damage dealt to it back to the player. Super bosses are the next level above unique, and are often at a higher level than the player can reach. Super bosses are also often found in areas off the beaten path, such as atop a mountain peak, where the player has been given navigational affordance to explore. With all these intricate mechanics tied together, the game appears to be innately complex. However, there are many affordances in the game design that allow for an intuitive balance between an innate and emergent complexity. For example, the game controller, either Wii Remote and Nunchuck configuration or the classic controller, can be easily manipulated physically, allowing for easy and intuitive access to the commands the player needs. This is further simplified with the removal of motion controls for the game, and the representation of the player's party on screen as a group of 3 of 7 of the total members in a third-person view. However, because of it being originally released on the Nintendo Wii, the game is limited in terms of graphical fidelity and exclusivity, with it being only available on the Wii, New 3DS, and the Wii U Virtual Console. It's worth mentioning here that what Xenoblade Chronicles may lack in graphical fidelity by today's standards, it more than makes up for it in its aesthetics. Each area has a very distinct motif and color palette, paired with easily one of the most amazing soundtracks produced. For example, Gower Plains, or Sartorial Marsh Knight. While the player is running between story missions, the game offers many digital pleasures such as eye-catching visuals to make the player feel completely immersed in the game, while the soundtrack creates touching and memorable moments in combination with the phenomenal voice acting
I'll kill you!
and sometimes cheesy lines to have the players understand Shulk's plight.
Can't have a rainbow without Ryan, baby.
Dunban, I think you need to have a talk with Ryan.
No. Let's pretend it didn't happen.
He's so cuddly I could almost cuddle him to death.
Ricky may well be the softest of all Nopon.
Ricky suddenly feel afraid.
Just goes to show. Brawn is better than brains.
Oh no, I can't let that one slip by.
The head! Shoot him in the head!
What? What did I say? Man, what a bunch of jokers.
Given that Xenoblade Chronicles is a linear story progression, player agency is extremely limiting with respect to story progress. This does not mean, however, that the player has no agency whatsoever with regards to gameplay. While side quests generally have a positive impact on the world at whole, certain side quests can be mutually exclusive and have a more negative impact on one or more characters, or even a combination of both. The quest lines, A Little Brother's Fight and A Big Brother's Fight, are early examples of this. Completing one means failing the other, and depending on which one is completed affects the affinity between the party and the two characters involved. Another means of agency given to the player in Xenoblade Chronicles is the affinity chart that comes in two forms: affinity between the 7 party members and affinity between the whole party and any given area. The player can battle with selected characters or gift items to other members of the party. By doing so, the chance for more successive rounds during a chain attack are raised between members of high affinity. Additionally, higher affinity allows for more insight into the party members in the form of heart-to-hearts, which are short scenes about 2 specific characters. These scenes often have certain affinity level requirements, and have 2 intermittent choices the player can make, which can dramatically affect the affinity between the 2 characters either negatively or positively, allowing for 4 possible outcomes to each scene. Affinity between the party and the given area acts as a reputation. By raising this affinity, more NPCs are available to interact with, the player can take on more side quests, and discounts in shops are deeper. By raising an area's affinity to a minimum of 4 to 5 stars, 2 extra skill trees can be unlocked for each of the 7 party members by talking to the right person. While the right person for each character is never explicitly stated, other NPCs in the area give hints every now and then. In the West, JRPGs are a relatively niche market, and so to create a game with such a wide and lasting appeal is no small task. As discussed, much of the success of Xenoblade Chronicles is due to its unusual, yet intuitive combat system, mechanics, memorable characters, and unique setting. These are also major contributors as to why it is an exemplary model for the RPG genre, as it took risks and shattered expectations from traditional JRPGs. A game as memorable as Xenoblade Chronicles initially exists thanks to the undying dedication and tireless efforts of the development team, and exists globally from the fanbase ceaselessly pushing for an overseas localization. Thank you for watching.
Now it's Ryan time!